Welcome back to the Foundation in C# course. We're currently in Module 9. In this lesson, we're going to be looking at the project creation for our ASP.NET Core Razor Pages project. Let's look at the homework. Create an ASP.NET Core Razor Pages web application in our current solution. Now, when I say create, I do mean create and set up. So make sure you add in the reference to our class library, and make sure you set up dependency injection to use the class we need from our class library, and get that all kind of ready to go, so that when we're starting to build our pages, we just need to worry about the page and not worry about the page and the setup too much. Okay, so go ahead and do that. Create the project in our same solution and reference our class library. Also set as a startup project. Those kind of things. Just get it ready to go, test it out, make sure it runs, and then come on back and unpause this video. Okay, so pause this video right now. All right, so I'm assuming that you have paused the video, you've done the work, and you come back. So let's go over to Visual Studio, and we'll see me do it. So let's right-click on the solution. We'll say Add, New Project. And I'm going to select an ASP.NET Core Web Application and hit Next. For a name, I will call it Hotel App.web. Okay, dots are acceptable in project names. Hit Create. And it's going to ask me, what type of project do you want to create? Well, I want to create a .NET Core, and I'll choose ASP.NET Core 3.1 framework and a web application. Now 3.1 is just out right now as the time of this recording, and 3.1 So just HTTPS, not Docker, and we're going to hit Create. And this will create the application and scaffold it out for us. Now the first thing I will do is I will close out of this tab, and I'm going to set this as the startup project. So right click and say Set as Startup Project. I'm going to add a reference to my class library. So now I have access to this class library inside of my web application, which is important because I want to have the ability to call this SQL data class to have these methods, because some of these methods are important for my front end. So I'm going to choose to use this in dependency injection using iDatabase data. So let's come over here to Startup, and notice we have here Services. happen is whenever I ask for an iDatabase data interface, it's going to give me back a new instance of SQL data. So that's dependency injection. So down here in SQL data, notice I ask for an iSQL data access, and I just assume I'm going to have one. Well, this will be through dependency injection. Now, since I created iSQL data access, I'm going to have to also add that as a transient in my startup here. So I'm going to have to say services.add transient iSQL data access, control dot to add the using statement, and then SQL data access is the implementation. Okay. Now, some people are a little concerned because they say, man, you have to put all those instances in your services in your front end. Why would you do that? It doesn't seem like it's a lot easier to put equals new in your code and then not have to do this all over. That's true, but as we're going to see later on in this course, replacing iDatabase data, instead of SQL data, we're going to have SQLite data. That's just a matter of changing that value. That's all it is. And now our entire application uses SQLite instead of SQL. So those kind of things are very, very powerful. This is where dependency injection really shines. We put all the instantiation right here, or what we'll do to instantiate essentially. That way, this controls it. This is a top-down control instead of a bottom-up. So instead of the SQL data saying, I have to use SQL data access. And so that is a low-level module telling the user interface, this is what I will use, and putting its foot down. Okay? That's not what we want. We want the top level, which is our startup from our web application, a very top level, saying, here's what you're going to use. This is what I have chosen. This is really helpful when you're talking about what type of data access. If you have more than one, you can tell it from the top down and say, this is what we will use. If you have logging, the top down says, this is the logging we will use. And the bottom up doesn't say, nope, I'm using that one over here. And you have to configure for all these different types. Nope. The top down tells everybody, this is what will happen. This is what type of classes you're going to use. That is the dependency inversion principle in practice. Okay, so the D in solid, that's what this is all about. Now, the implementation of that is dependency injection, where we have a setup process that's really easy. Just map an interface to a type, and then whenever that interface is asked for, so in SQL data, we ask for a iSQL data access, no problem. Since we asked for it, I'm going to give you whatever we mapped over here. So iSQL data access, you get a SQL data access class. All right, so that's what dependency injection is, and that's how we've set it up in our Razor Pages application. Pretty simple stuff. It's just a couple of add transients and we're good to go. Now, if you had 30 classes, you'd probably have 30 add transients here, maybe a couple singletons. Okay, so we've got the dependency injection all set up. So all we need to do is ask for an iDatabase data, and we'll get SQL data. And everything else should take care of itself. Notice that SQL data access asks for an iConfiguration, which we have not mapped. But that's a standard in-the-box value we can get from .NET Core, iConfiguration. And so we don't even have to do anything for that. We just say, yep, we've got that already, and it's going to give it to SQL data access when it asks for it. Now note that when we ask for an iDatabase data instance, we're going to get back SQL data. But SQL data asks for an iSQL data access, which when we ask for this, it's going to give us this. But this asks for iConfiguration. So it says this chain of dependencies. Dependency injection will take care of that chain for you. It will say, okay, I need a SQL data, and that depends on SQL data access, and that depends on the configuration root, which is what the implementation of iConfiguration is. We have the main page and the privacy page. That's all we have. But notice that, that our window here gives it a little more information about, okay, it's listening on port 5001 for HTTPS and port 5000 for HTTP. Great. That's all we really need to know. So we're all set here. So now we can close this out, close out our Kestrel window. We can look at our app settings.json and just note that by default we have some logging level information. We're not going to mess with logging levels for this application. So this is going to be a standard, and it's going to output to the console as our logging window. Now, if you wanted to change that, you could, and I've got some videos and tutorials on that if you want to see them. But for this course, we're not going to worry about changing the logging level for our hotel app.web. And that's because, again, we're focusing on minimum viable product. And so it works as it is, so we're going to go ahead and leave it alone. All right, so with that, we are done with this lesson. So once you're done play around with this, making sure you got it, understanding what's going on, then move on to the next lesson. We're going to build our first page.